The new decade is in. We have entered a bold new world for video games, with 2020 promising some of the industry's most anticipated titles yet, from Cyberpunk 2077 through to The Last of Us Part 2. We also have a brand new console generation to get hype for, but first, we need to take stock and reflect on the year just past. Because 2019, well, it was a bit of a weird year. Let's be real. The conversation has mostly focused on fantastic indie outings from the likes of Control and Disco Elysium, and for great reason. These games pushed the boundaries of what games can be and left an indelible mark on the video game landscape. On the flip side though, you'd be forgiven for forgetting about some more talked about games, despite them being 2019's most anticipated releases. With that in mind, I'm Will for WhatCulture, and here are 10 high-profile 2019 video games you've already forgotten about. 10. Days Gone. Days Gone was not a bad game. Its controls worked, it looks really good, and when you did stumble into the much advertised hordes of freakers, it was actually a terrifying experience. The problem with Days Gone is that it didn't do anything new for either the post-apocalyptic zombie or open-world genre. Both genres have acted as the bedrock for this last console generation, with varying degrees of success. For every The Last of Us or Breath of the Wild, there have been countless other titles that have played out the old tropes poorly and to death. By the time Days Gone was released, players had already become tired of having to invest another significant amount of time to open up the new world. Days Gone would have to do something special to entice players in. Unfortunately, it did not. 9. Kingdom Hearts III. Kingdom Hearts 3 had been stuck in development hell for a little over 14 years. After the success of Kingdom Hearts 2, fans were clamoring to get a hold of a then next-generation experience on the Xbox 360 or PS3. This deadline was well missed, however. With Square Enix's decision to change the whole game engine, Kingdom Hearts 3 needed a complete makeover. A makeover which meant delays, which further pushed expectations on this much-anticipated title. It was released with favourable reviews. Thankfully, to the fans who had waited an eternity for the title, the game was hugely fun and delivered knockout graphics. The issue was that it had been 14 years since the last game. There was a whole generation of young gamers who had no memory of the previous mainline entry. Couple this with the decision to plug the time between games with a multitude of spin-off stories, and soon, Kingdom Hearts requires a bachelor's degree in video game lore to understand. For those die-hard fans that had patiently waited for years and years, playing the other games and keeping on top of the lore, Kingdom Hearts 3 was a success. For the rest of us that do not have that kind of time or energy, it simply drifted by. 8. Jump Force. To mark the 50th anniversary of the hugely popular Shonen Jump magazine, Japanese publisher Bandai Namco created a 3D one-on-one fighter with a huge roster of characters from some of the manga's most iconic franchises. From Bleach to Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh! To One Piece, some of Japan's most beloved exports were finally at the fingertips of players. Dream matchups and who would win in a fight scenarios were finally possible to answer. For fans of manga and this style of fighter, Jump Force was a match made in heaven. For the rest of us, however, Jump Force doesn't do enough to entice you in. The story is convoluted and does require some level of understanding about the franchises involved, excluding those of us who are not well versed in the thousands of editions and episodes of One Piece and Dragon Ball Super. Graphically, the textures swung wildly from unpolished to a complete freaking horror show. Jump Force was a game made for a very specific audience, and while there is nothing wrong with that, the game was soon forgotten in the broader conversation. 7. Concrete Genie. Alas, Concrete Genie, you were too pure for this world. Pixel Opus' action-adventure game tasks players to revitalize the ramshackle town of Denska, a fictional seaside town that has become forgotten and broken. The majority of the action in the game comes from taking your magic brush to paint over the barren walls of the town with neon paintings of players' own design from an ever-expanding sketchbook. Concrete Genie lets players take the game at their own pace. Perils exist, but they are slight, and punishments are not game-destroying. You will soon find yourself trying to paint the town in the most beautiful, inventive way possible. beautiful. The game itself is wonderful. However, the issue lies in its beauty. Unless you're looking for gentle catharsis, Concrete Genie doesn't offer a lot outside of its artistic premise. The game is simple and wonderful, but it is a hard sell to the broader video games community. Pair this with Concrete Genie's October release date, putting it in direct competition with established franchises in a hectic release window, and soon, Concrete Genie found itself falling foul to the same fate as the fictional town it sets itself in. It's a tragedy, but it's true. Sometimes just being really good isn't enough. 6. Rage 2. There is nothing wrong with taking a tried and tested formula as the foundation of your game, as long as you offer something new and exciting outside of what players would typically expect. Unfortunately for Bethesda, Rage 2 was about as bland as a dust sandwich. It was somewhat of a swerve when Bethesda announced Rage 2 in May 2018. But the original Rage from 2011 was remembered fondly and received favourable reviews. What was going to set Rage 2 apart from the menagerie of open-world dystopian games on the market was its blend of snappy gunplay with a big open sandbox to explore in. It should have been a match made in heaven. Though the gameplay as a whole felt like playing Doom, the time spent outside of combat was drab. The characters were nondescript and annoying, the world itself couldn't be differentiated from any other sandy, apocalyptic wasteland, the game shipped with the characteristic Bethesda bugs, and somehow had a microtransaction store on a single player experience. In the end, Rage 2 didn't present itself as anything new or worth investing protracted time into, and fell into the void of identical open-world dystopias. 5. Wolfenstein Youngblood. Following in the footsteps of the 2017 epic Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus was never going to be easy. New Colossus had a brilliant story, brilliantly punctuated by brilliant characters and brilliant gameplay that brilliantly married difficulty with brilliant you dual-wielding brilliant shotguns like a brilliant maniac. You might say the game itself, as a whole, was, very good. If Youngblood could capture just some of that magic, we were in for a good time. But what players were met with was a noticeable step backwards in the franchise. Youngblood mixed up the formula by making the UI and gameplay feel more like a shared world shooter, with leveled enemies and numbers popping up over their heads. This immediately kills the core gameplay. No longer was the focus on the fluidity of movement and thinking of great ways to take enemies down. Now, some enemies were mere fodder, whilst higher level super soldiers were just bullet sponges that were not satisfying to destroy. Killing Nazis is supposed to be fun. Youngblood was not fun. 4. Medieval. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. With the huge successes of Crash Bandicoot and Spyro's remakes, it makes sense for Sony to try and capture both the imaginations of new and existing audiences by remaking PS1 classic Medieval. Developers Other Ocean Interactive were extremely loyal to the source material and produced a remake that felt very much like the PS1 original. This is both their credit and their detriment. Though Medieval felt very modern back in 1998, the 21 years that have followed have seen astronomical strides in what a video game can be. Though the graphical improvements were magnificent, Sir Daniel has never looked so brilliantly goofy. And Medieval didn't modernize in ways players wanted or expected. From boxy-feeling controls through to the truly infuriating lack of mid-level checkpoints, Medieval is a stark reminder of why certain game design ideas were left in the past. 3. Shenmue III. Shenmue was one of the first hipster franchises in video game history. When the creator Yu Suzuki launched a Kickstarter campaign to fund Shenmue III, the internet went crazy. By the end of the campaign, Shenmue III was the highest backed game in history with an eye-watering 6.3 million, and catapulted the game into the psyche of all players eager to get to grips with Suzuki's true open world. And we did certainly get a beautifully realised world, with hundreds of characters to interact with, but where Shenmue in 1999 felt fresh and imaginative, Shenmue in 2019 was stiff and frustrating. The voice acting was comically poor, the character models looked unnatural, and the gameplay itself moved at a snail's pace. Shenmue 3, for all its promise, just didn't deliver a game to justify the 4-year Kickstarter hype. 2. Crackdown 3. Crackdown was a couch co-op epic when it released for the Xbox 360 in 2007. The responsive gameplay allowed for players to control their heroes in a way that suited them, whether through agility, strength, or by blowing things up really well. The cel-shaded art style made Crackdown feel like a superhero comic coming to life. It was an electric, magnificent game. Crackdown 2 gave players more of the same, much to its detriment, but there was still a thirst for a new Crackdown experience when a follow-up game was announced at E3 2015. Soon after, however, things began to unravel. Crackdown found itself in the dreaded development hell. The much-touted Microsoft Cloud computer-based destruction, the key selling point of Crackdown 3, could never deliver on the scope the 2015 demo boasted. But beyond that, Crackdown 3 was a relic. Not in the charming, if aggravating way Shenmue 3 and Medieval are. Crackdown 3 felt like an open-world game a decade older than it was. Boring, repetitive side quests that unlocked abilities to help with a boss at the end. Nothing new, no identity, and not even pretty enough to get away with it. 1. Anthem. Oh, Anthem! Look how they massacred my boy! Anthem had so much potential. Where Bungie had the gameplay loop down but a very thin surface-level story with Destiny, Anthem was going to change the face of the shared world shooter by mixing dynamic gameplay with meaningful storytelling. It was going to be EA's ultimate cash cow. What we got instead was a beautiful looking game with excellent combat, but nothing else. The much anticipated story didn't push the boat out in any way. The NPCs were limited and lacked the imagination of iconic BioWare characters such as Morrigan and Garrus. But most criminally of all, the world of Bastion was empty. There was no incentive for players to spend a prolonged time in Anthem, but whereas Bungie continued the release of content and regular roadmaps for Destiny, Anthem went dark. Though in recent months there has been talk of extensive reworks, BioWare and EA seemingly downed tools the moment Anthem wasn't a monumental success, keeping the game serviceable but bare bones. Anthem should have been a game with years of storytelling potential. Instead, players have moved on and are amazed to find out the game still exists at all. And there you have it, folks, 10 high-profile 2019 video games you've already forgotten about. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at YouSlyDollU. I'm Will for WhatCulture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.